Okay, so I'm going to give a tour of my vegetable garden. It's actually been a really hard year. It started off cold and wet, and there were like masses of slugs and loads of snails, and I had a really bad pigeon problem. It kept on raining, it didn't get too dry, so I kept replanting stuff. And now I think it's just it's my finest work of art. 90% of my seeds I collect from these plants. I let one or two go to seed. I plant them directly in the ground. I don't plant them in plant pots. I used to do that, I used to do all that stuff. And then after like 10 years, I looked around and all the memory of all the crops had disappeared and all the plastic was left. And I just started wondering if all the crops were worth it. My basic aim is to grow enough for the year, including things I'm going to pull up and store, and see if I can do it just with my own hand, with some basic hand tools, without plastic, and see if I can actually make a positive impact with my vegetable garden, rather than creating another pile of junk, which is what I've done in the past. It's an artist's view in a way of like a vegetable garden, and for me, as long as it's beautiful, that's part of the nourishment. If it was just food, I don't think I'd feel completely full, even if I had a huge crop. I grow a lot of every crop, but some crops, you have to understand, I lose a lot to mice, field voles, birds. As long as they only take like 25%, 50%, for me it's okay, I understand I'm like the biggest creature in my garden, and it's normal that I should be working and other things should be living in my ecosystem. When you start saying, well, I don't want these slugs eating my carrots or eating my lettuces, have you really thought about the hedgehogs that are going to eat the slugs? And if you want to have all the animals, you've got to be prepared to do some work of which you're not going to get the food. And it's not that you do work for nothing. Some people say you're just working for nothing, but it depends what you're calling nothing, because is a hedgehog suffering along the path, is that nothing, or is it a quality of life? Is the owl flying around at night, is that nothing, or is it a quality of life? And to me, it just seems we've forgotten that. We're just looking at a crop, but we've forgotten about the quality of life, and that's perhaps just as important as having food in our stomach. Here in this vegetable garden, I've got masses of field voles, and sometimes they eat like 80% of my beetroot. It's just too much, it's crazy. But I'm still believing in a natural balance being created, and if I just have patience, maybe I'll get more birds of prey, more owls. I like working, it's a pleasure to work. I don't need all the food, and if it creates a beautiful environment, then I'm proud to be the main character in a big battlefield. It's hard to see it all at the same time because some things have already come up and some things I haven't planted yet. So this is where I had broad beans. I planted broad beans last October, and then they came up before the winter, and I had a really early crop of broad beans in May, and so that was great. You can see these are the last ones, and I've been well, I got a load of seed off the last one. These are for seed as well. And in the spot of the broad beans, I planted some tomatoes. These are some plants that a friend gave me. I don't have a polytunnel, and so normally my tomatoes get mildew on the leaves, and so I don't get a crop. But these are some plants that a friend gave me which are meant to be blight resistant, so I popped them in the ground. I'm going to see how they go. It's a trial. I used to do masses of new things every year. I used to do like 5 or 6 new vegetables, but I try and limit myself just to 1 or 2 new things, otherwise I get overwhelmed. So these are the poppies. So this is something that was actually really beautiful about a month ago when they were all out, but we've still got a few poppies left. They aren't like the red poppies, they're the specific variety for poppy seed, which is actually the same plant as the opium poppy. So it's got these big seed heads. And the thing about these are I'm going to have to wait for them to dry. When they dry, they get little holes around the top, and then you can shake out the seed. In my climate in Brittany, it's a little bit damp for drying poppy seed. This is why I'm only doing 2 rows, because it can often start raining too much around August and September, and I'm going to pick the heads and put them in a basket and take them in and out on hot days. And the poppy seed I'm going to put in the bread. I've actually got my pumpkin plants. You can see it's starting to do something here. And these are the potty marron variety. It's pumpkin with a sort of a chestnutty flavour. Got quite a lot of rotted compost on here to keep the moisture in and stop the weeds from growing too much, even though I need to pull some of these things up. But once again, I didn't plant any of these. I planted all these plants directly in the ground, so that's why they're probably a bit behind other people's plants. But actually, they've got well enough time to get established. I'll get a huge crop if all goes well. This is borage. I planted it 5 or 6 years ago. Once I bought the seeds and I planted it, and now it reseeds every year. And I just let it grow up in spots where I don't really have anything else going on. And it's, I mean, I love blue flowers. Anything that's blue has a place in the garden. The bees love it. The flowers are actually really yummy. Yes, spring and everything. And the leaves are good, but they're a little bit spiny, so you need to scrumple them a bit. But these are the top weeds. This is the fat hen, which is also edible, but not in the quantities I've got. And this is red leg. This is another weed that last year it just ate up my garden. I completely devoured the whole thing, so I didn't see it coming. So this year I'm just pulling up red leg, but it's edible too, you know. This is the one thing that really didn't work. It was my peas. You can see I've got 1 or 2, but I planted them 3 times, and the wood pigeons just ate them down to the ground all the time. So I put up these frames and they've just stayed bare. It's a bit sad, really. But I have a plan, because the pumpkin plants are going to climb up the pea frames. It happened last year, but it was just a coincidence. And they climb up the pea frame, and they're going to crawl along, and they're going to be dropping their pumpkins down all the way along. So it's not lost. You just have to have a bit of patience, and it's going to be pumpkin, pumpkin, pumpkin all the way down. A lot of people ask me about watering, and basically a good gardener doesn't really do a lot of watering. I've got a couple of wells, but they will look quite a long way away. It's not very convenient. Any water I have to bring in a wheelbarrow in buckets. And the main thing I water are the pumpkin plants, because they just seem to drink water. You can see even today it's not been that hot, but they're starting to wilt. But the rest of the plants I don't really water, and it's only when I want to sow something. If spring's dry and I want to sow something, and then I'll water. I'll make the seed drill and I'll pour water in and plant the seeds. But it's generally just for that moment that I'll do some watering. So these are the marigolds as well. Here's something else I planted a few years ago, and now it just re-sows itself. So it just gives a bit of colour. It's nice to have a few flowers. This is where the onions and shallots were. It's a really good soil here, but it's a little bit dry, and my onions they start well and then they just dry out earlier than what I think they should. and so they kind of fizzled out, so I pulled them up. So they're not huge. I've got a variety which grows like shallots. You plant one bulb and then it divides into 10 or 20 bulbs, and they're great for pickling. And I grill them as well, like chestnuts, and they're called potato onions, so it's like a heritage variety. But yeah, anyway, this is a really great flower. This is Viper's Bugloss. It's just such a lovely flower, and it's fantastic. It's a real cottage garden flower. It's chock full of nectar. The bees love it. You just need to plant it once and it'll grow up. It'll sell seeds and grow up all around the garden. And it's blue. Well, some of them are blue, some of them are purple. It's always a lucky dip, but I saw it in someone's vegetable garden. I thought, it's not going to be perfect. My life can't be perfect without Viper's Bugloss. And it's quite right. The joy my Viper's Bugloss gives me is immense. And this is for turnips. Turnips are the last thing to go in. I'll plant them around in the end fortnight of August. And it's going to be for turnip and beetroot pickle, which is just the best thing. I'm going to survive all the winter on it. Obviously, a proper vegetable garden should give all its own seed as well. So it's not just for veg. And these are my leeks. They're like pom-poms. These are the cabbages. This I basically made a cabbage cage. This is a cabbage cage, and it keeps out the pigeons, more or less. It's pigeon ready, I would say. If I had a really bad pigeon attack, I'd put more bits of branches on it. But the idea is that it keeps out the pigeons, and the pigeons, all they want to do is eat the cabbage leaves. But if I'd put a net over, I'd have kept out the small birds. But the small birds I want to eat the green fly and the caterpillars. And so this is a system where the small birds come in, and they even like it, because when they go in, they feel protected from the owls and the buzzards. So it even encourages them to go in, and they're going to eat all the green fly and all the caterpillars. And the pigeons, because the pigeons, the thing is, pigeons are like huge, great big birds. And they're really unwieldy. They're like a big aeroplane. Like a big aeroplane. They do big runway to land and to take off. And they just haven't got the space. So they don't want to climb in because they know they can't get out. But the wrens and the robins and things, they're just going to dart in and eat all the caterpillars. I mainly got kale. I have to admit that the cabbages with big tight heads are a challenge, even for a good gardener. And the winter kale is just a lot easier. So this is purple sprouting broccoli. That's Italian kale. This is kohlrabi. And I've got some curly leaf kale and some Brussels sprouts. So this is a row of parsnips. They're embarrassingly small. I must apologise for my parsnips, but I planted a row really early, like I always do, in March. And the first time in my whole life the slugs ate them. I was left just one plant. And so when I saw it, it normally takes them about a month to germinate. So after about a month and a half, I thought it's just really not happening. And so I planted a new row. And that's why they're small. But that's what's interesting, that most vegetables you can plant. I mean, almost everything you can plant until May. Most vegetables you can plant in June, and a lot of them you can plant until the first half of July. So generally, the mistake is to plant too early. And that's a mistake I made with my parsnips. This is a row of beetroot. Because what I do when I do the vegetable, when I plant, I start off with my onions. That's the first thing I plant. And then it's parsnips. And then it peas, and I just plant in order. I'm not really doing companion planting. I'm actually just planting in order of what needs planting first, what needs planting second. And so that's the sort of order I've got in the garden. Now this is the beetroot. They're starting to fatten up. I'm doing a lot of beetroot this year. I've got a row here, a row over there. And the great thing about beetroot is that they keep. Quite remarkable. So I can basically eat them for I can start eating them now, and I can be eating them until May if I grow enough. And that's why it's one of the vegetables that it's actually worth growing a large amount. This is leaf beet. I stopped growing spinach years and years and years ago because it just flowers. You plant it and it flowers straight away. So I just don't think it's worth the space in the garden all the time. And leaf beet's great because you plant it in April, pick it all year, and then it doesn't do much over winter, but next spring it'll start flowering and it makes masses of leaves, so you've got loads of stuff to eat. So it's actually a really interesting vegetable, which I think the leaves are a bit more delicate than the spinach leaves, so it's harder to transport and commercialise. But for the amateur vegetable gardener, it's really is one of the best plants. This is mustard. It's a sort of a trial. I'm trying to. I'm mainly growing it for seed. I can make fresh mustard from it, and I'm sort of dreaming of making mustard oil. I won't have enough with my 2 rows, but I want to build up my seed collection. So can we cut through the mustard? These are carrots, and this is a tip that my neighbour gave me, that she plants coriander. She plants a row of carrots, and then every few feet she plants some coriander. Everybody's got their sort of magic tip to keep out carrot fly. And the main tip I've got is that I just grow 1 or 2 long rows rather than growing like 7 rows together in a block, because I think that it's more easily detected by the carrot fly when it's in a block. This coriander idea, part of the idea that the coriander is smelly, so it gives the sort of, the carrot fly is attracted to the carrot smell, but the coriander's got a different smell. Another idea is that the carrot fly flies it's a bit silly, it flies to a certain height above, above the carrot, and then when it hits the coriander, it has to go up and fly above, and then it just keeps on flying and it misses the carrots. That's what she told me, so I'm kind of trying the coriander, but it's worked pretty well because I planted my coriander at the same time as the carrots, and it's quite good. This is summer savoury. That's another herb. I'll be cutting that and drying it. And we'll be going up there, but I just want to show you my strawberries. I've got 3 beds of strawberries. This is 1-year-old. That's 2-year-old. And one over there is 3-year-old. And the 3-year-old bed I'm going to hoe up and destroy. This autumn I'm going to plant a new bed of fresh plants. And what they tell you about strawberries is that the plants get viruses, and so the strawberries are smaller and smaller. So the nurseries will tell you that you need to keep buying new plants, virus-free plants. But a good tip is that if you collect the runners from 1-year-old plants, they're a lot more vigorous and they're more or less virus-free. So you won't have to buy your new plants from the plant nursery, which for me kind of spoilt the whole thing, really, thinking I was going to have to go back to the garden nursery and buy my plants every year. You can see it's found a bit of earth and it's starting to make its roots, so come October I'm going to dig it up and I'm going to make a new strawberry bed, and I'm going to hoe up my old strawberry bed, so, which is good because the old one is starting to get invaded by weeds. This is interesting. This is Perpetual Cabbage, and this it kind of grows every year, and you need to keep regenerating it by breaking off a side branch and sticking it in the ground, but it's like an old heritage cabbage, and it's quite good raw. This is my amaranth. It shouldn't really be in the vegetable garden. It's just I grew, it's like a South American grain. And this is my quinoa. And this isn't. This is my fat hen that's pretending to be a quinoa, but they look very similar, you see. You've got to have I can't tell the difference much myself, but I think now it's flowering, you can start to see it's the quinoa is like more purple and chunky. And this is fat hen. It's got, you can eat the seeds, but they're absolutely minuscule. The amaranth is same family as the fat hen and the quinoa. Easier to see the difference between it and the weeds because it's red, and it's got small grains that you can eat, like rice. The quinoa is the same. The quinoa is my first year of growing it, so I'm just growing one row to see if it's any good. The amaranths I've tried for like 4 or 5 years now, and it really does grow well. And I grew too much last year. I grew 20 kilos, so I'm just growing one row this year because I've got a lot left. But it's really easy to harvest. You just cut the plants when they start turning a bit brown and hit them against something, and all the seeds fall out. And this obviously is the dill. And the dill, it's a bit of a magic crop. It's great in pickles, in my lacto-fermented pickles. And the seeds, thing is, the green seeds I'm going to cut off when they're green and put in my pickles. But really, I'm going to wait till the seeds dry and use them in my bread. I kind of have it as a seed crop to give the bread flavour. My vegetable garden isn't about having a huge amount of veg in summer and nothing in winter. I'm trying to have a vegetable garden that gives me stuff all year. So although it's a really big vegetable garden, when you look at it carefully, only 1 or 2 things are really things that come now in summer, like the French beans. These are my climbing French beans, and these are my dwarf French beans. And these are going to give me a massive crop. I'm going to be snowed under on French beans. I'm not going to have time to eat courgettes. So I grow 1 or 2 things to give me a summer glut, and the rest of it is the beetroot for the winter. The amaranth, the quinoa, that seed, that's to be dried and eat any time of the year. The dill's mainly for seed. The herbs are for dry, and the carrots are for the winter. So it's all about timing it. Otherwise you do a lot of work, you get a huge amount of stuff for a couple of months, and the rest of the year you've got nothing to eat. So this is an apple tree that just, it wasn't me that put it here. It was here when we got the patch. It's sort of useful, sort of not. The apples fall like bombs and sort of crush everything beneath them. So it's a bit of a nuisance, but it also kind of keeps the moisture more. You'd think it would drain it with its roots, but it doesn't. It just keeps the moisture, provides shade. So I planted some lettuces under it, things I don't really like the summer heat. But I've also got a thyme bush that's doing really well. It just absolutely loves it. I've had it here for about 7 or 8 years now, and it just gets bigger every year. And I planted a few herb plants. That's my lemon verbena, and that's the sage.
Nasturtiums.
And the nasturtiums grow up by themselves. That's something I planted a few years ago. I don't bother planting them anymore. If you like eating flowers, nasturtium flowers are much better than the leaves. So this is my sweetcorn. It's one of those frost sensitive plants, so all my like my French beans, my sweetcorn I planted in the second fortnight of May, after the last frost, so when the ground starts heating up. Often the sweetcorn starts germinating and then the birds pull it up and eat the sweetcorn. And my tip is that I dib a really deep hole, like this deep, and I find that when I dib it that deep and I put the sweetcorn right at the bottom, I don't know, either the bird's beak isn't long enough, or the plants got all big enough by the time it gets up to the surface, but they don't get bird attack, and I think they get less mice damage too. And surprisingly, you'd think that the sweetcorn might rot if it's that deep down, but it doesn't. It's strong enough to send its shoot right up here. And I do the same with peas, because peas are something that can suffer from bird damage. So yeah, this is my sweetcorn, and I'm growing a lot. And it's not even that sweet, because if you want really sweet sweetcorn, a lot of the varieties are hybrid F1s. and you can't save the seed yourself. You have to buy new seed. So this is one that it's like a blue sweet corn. It's got blue kernels, and I can save it from one year to the next. I like to grill it in hot embers in its green skin, but I think I'm going to have way too much here because it all gets ripe at the same time. And I'm going to lacto-ferment it like sauerkraut. I'm going to cut it off the cob, and I'm going to put it in salted water. And it's going to mean that I can just process it really fast, because otherwise I'd have to organise a huge party to eat all this corn. And this is the kale seed. Oh yeah, we haven't done it all. We've got the loop. So this is going to be a good chance just to show how I keep the weeds down. Because people, ask me how I keep my weeds down. And I've got two things. One is that, I can hand weed and go down the road and pull out the weeds, but I do a lot with my hoe. And I mean, it helps. I've got a very organised looking vegetable garden. Everything's in rows, because I do a lot of hoeing, and basically when it's in a row, I can go down the row with my hoe, and obviously it's best to do it on a dry day. On a dry day, the sun burns up all the weeds that you've hoed up, and on a rainy day they'll just all root again. The hoe is my main tool for keeping the weeds down. And also when I'm not planting anything, I don't like to leave the soil bare. And that's what all those piles of grass are at the top. Is that when I pull the crop up, I'm going to put grass on the bare patches. And it's going to have a double effect. It keeps the weeds down. It suffocates the weeds, and basically it fertilizes the soil. I don't have manure, so my only compost really are the weeds and the old vegetables that I put on the compost, and the rotted grass, and that's how I keep the fertility going in the vegetable garden.